Welcome to Ming Presents The Re-Up, a conversation with the artistic mind.
Ball Jew alert!
Two live Jews. Two
actually alive Jews. I love this.
I know.
Got like the clean beard. I got the pepper going, salt and pepper going on.
You know, I don't know how I haven't gone gray, but my theory, I mean, I have gray, but my theory is like if you go bald early, you keep the color in your hair. Because my friends, all these silver foxes that I know, got these great heads of hair, and they're gray as anything, but they're all like, how come your beard is so brown?
Yeah, man. It's looking good.
I don't need that hair, though.
Yeah, I hate that I have a thick beard, but it's so silvery that like it doesn't look like anything's there. So it just annoys me. I know that's not what we're going to talk about today, but it just whatever. It's just,
you're a handsome man. I don't think it really matters.
That's my pose. And with that, there's only room for one set of baldness.
It's look, this is what it is. It's just two thumbs. Like that's what whenever two bald guys talk to each other, all I see is thumbs doing it. What's up, Mario? I see Mario just joined.
Uh-oh.
The usual crew is going to be heckling and jeckling. I can tell. Everyone was excited when I was going to call. You know, the funny thing is you're on my list of people to hit up, and thank you for filling in. Adam filled in last minute. We had a cancellation. But you're on my list. There's a short list of people to have these conversations with. And I was like, when am I going to be ready to speak to Adam? I'm not sure.
Oh, man.
Well, no, the reason is that both you and I are not quiet political musicians. No. And we're also we're active in general we do a lot of different stuff. So it's always like, how do you, in an hour, how do you bring all of that to the table without having it be one-sided? Right? And having it be like a squawk fest about one thing. Because one of my favorite things about you as an artist is your voice, your political voice, and also, you know, on social media, because I think that's important. Yeah. You know, that whole thing when people tell artists to shut up and just stay in their lane is the funniest. It's the funniest thing to me ever. I don't even understand that concept.
Well, you know, the funniest reaction I saw to that was Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine.
Yes. That's the ultimate.
Yeah, I mean, the guy is like, you know, just stick to music. And he's like, did you not listen to my entire catalog? Like,
but what's even, you know, he's like a PhD in political science from Harvard.
Yeah. So
not only is he an expert in what he's talking about, it's like, but that's the height of where we're at with, I want to say the stupidity of humanity at this point, because I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah. It's certainly the frustration of the lack of belief in science and facts and logic. And I think that a lot of what we are and where we are as a nation comes down to the willful ignorance of people and the purposeful, like, uninformed, not informing people of how things work. Like, you know, we're on the verge of a really major anniversary of a horrible act in this country's history tomorrow with, I think it's tomorrow or Sunday, the Tulsa, you know, racial bombings, you know, at 99 years ago. And, you know, you have a president that says, you know, if it wasn't for me, nobody would know what Juneteenth is. You know, it just comes down to people not understanding civics, people not understanding government, people not understanding science, people not, you know, there's a reason why a Donald Trump exists. And there's a reason why there's like a gaping hole for someone like him to run through, because there's a lot of angry, uninformed people that just, it's easy. It's funny, you know, I think of Rage Against the Machine was huge when Bill Clinton was president. And I'm like, why aren't they huge when Donald Trump is president or George W. Bush? That's when we needed Rage Against the Machine.
I know. You know, I have a theory on that concept, and it also ties in with music production and what's I think is successful in music. Yeah. One thing that I'm just digressing. No. I think the idea that a musician is not a well-informed, educated person is a common thread, sort of the stupid musician. I don't know any really dumb musicians that are successful. Most of the guys that I know who have been doing it the way that we've been doing it are really diverse, bright, open, smart, investigative, committed people. They committed to education because music is not easy. It's difficult. It's a difficult thing. You're constantly chasing knowledge with it. It's not like you got it and you're done. Oh, I got this thing. I'm done. Right? It's like a discipline that never stops beating on you to get better. You have to get better, otherwise it just passes you by. Yeah. And inherently, I think that keeps us open.
Well, I also think about music in my own sort of introduction to it as it's completely through a Black American lens. And if you're going to be a white musician in this culture, everything that you do is steeped in the history of this country and the history of the Black experience in this country. You know, if you're into rock, that means you've gone through the blues. The blues is Black music.
Right.
If you're into anything that grooves, ultimately that comes from jazz. And that is Black music. So telling a musician whose I look at it this way. My entire mentorship and my entire pathway into a career in music was fostered by, mentored by, and educated by Black musicians. So telling me to shut up based on what I've learned and who I've learned from, and it's like, what is the term is just stick to music.
Yeah.
I love that. It's like, it's so ignorant because it's like, really? So that assumes that you know anything about who I am and where I come from. Especially, by the way, as a Jewish American.
I know. Well, I have a good Jewish American story, which I'll tell you later on. But, if you ask me, if I think back and look over the history of my music, and people are always asking me, like, who are your influences? What influenced you? That whole kind of thing. And I was never like, besides having the starry eyes when I was a kid from metal bands, because metal was bigger than life to me. Like, until I understood the whole thing behind the music business and all that, like, that was still a dreamy idea to me. Metal and stages and Iron Maiden and big, like all this crazy stuff. But the music that I grew up on and that really has always influenced my life has always been Black music. I mean, besides metal, which is also a derivation of Black music, which much more, it's very white in terms of, it's kind of, but, my biggest influence is Stevie Wonder, reggae, Steel Pulse, James Brown. I couldn't do a day. I mean, on the worst day of my life, or like when my wife is down, I'm always putting on James Brown. And immediately we both will remember how good you feel and how great that music is and how timeless, or Prince, or you go on and on and on and on. Miles Davis, go on and on, you know what I mean? It's never ending. It's this fabric of who we are. But back to the idea, though, of music goes in cycles. I think that people, when there's a lot of money in the country, and that tends to happen when Democrats are in office for long enough, because they start paying down the national debt, they invest in social programs, whether they're perfect or not, which is a whole other conversation about young people and perfect politicians. But the amount of money that the regular, everyday, everyman has during those periods increases, and therefore your ability to enjoy life and be happier tends to happen. And you can make positive decisions because you're not struggling to pay bills. You're not struggling to do the everyday things. And during those times, the music business usually fosters, it's sort of like the bounty season. Not only do you get happy music, but you get angry music, and you get dark music, and you get light music, and pop music soars, and heavy metal soars. But when things get bad and money gets tighter in the country, you start to get rid of, like, the stuff in between starts to not do as well, and you get pop music does really well because people want to feel happy. Legacy music does really well because people want to reminisce about a better time, and heavy music does really well because people just want to put their energy into that. But I think where we're at right now is that people are out of energy to put it into that type of music, so they want to put it into legacy music because it's familiar and it's less painful than discovering something new. Given the times, I mean, I'm seeing that, even Spotify streaming is saying that, like, their legacy catalogs are blowing up over the last.
Well, actually, the catalog in general, it's funny. My brother, I don't really talk about it a lot, but my brother ran catalog for Apple Music for about 7 years And before he did that, he ran Rhino Records, which was the big, like, for Warner Music, it's the catalog division of probably one of the best catalogs in the history of music. And even with a very recently healthy publishing and pop music singles driven business that has existed, catalog has been the backbone and the real earner for a long time now. And I think theories, one, I mean, I think catalog is always going to out earn current music in a lot of ways because there's so much more of it than the current, the current music or the new stuff. And
you also don't have to spend money on breaking it.
Exactly. It's always sitting there waiting to be streamed, or in certain cases, a lot of people still buy physical media and they buy it. But what's been interesting with this last 20 years, specifically for me, in pop music is that because of a lot of technology and because of the ease of attaining technology, I've noticed a lot of contraction of styles of music. So, in other words, when we were kids, a label had a rock department. A label had a jazz division. A label had a classical division. Now the labels, they had that 10-year period where streaming got away from them. They didn't really, in a lot of ways, iTunes bailed the label industry out with a legal, like finding, 2004, you found a legal way to buy MP3s at one source. And they were making like $4 to $5 billion a year off of legal downloads through that store. But I think what also happened in that next 15 years, and we're still in it, is that while there's always at all times tons of music on a major label level, we really entered a period where like it was like pop with a rapper in the verse and a female singer in the chorus.
Yeah.
Like Friday night, I'm a girl. I'm just stupid. I'm a girl. I'm just a stupid girl that partied on Friday night. We went through a period, and we know guys that were, I would say the Dr. Luke ization of pop music for a 10-year period was like, I need a single like that. You get Max Martin, and this is what pop music is. And you get a rapper, and you get it. It's really unique in the history, I think, of music in the last 10 years. We were ripe for political and angry, and there is there are plenty of artists that have a message, but man, from the major labels, I don't know about you, man, but I don't even go into those buildings anymore. I haven't been in those buildings for 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
There's nothing happening there for me personally.
Well, where that started falling off for me, to give because I did a lot of remix work, and that's always the lucrative part of that is from major labels. So if you want to make money from my toe always stayed in major labels for the remix work, and so I would go in exactly to your point of sort of the disappearing silos inside of a major label, which used to make that label. The reason why it was major is because it could buy independents and then put them into a silo. Yeah. Is that urban music, when it was at its heyday, they didn't have like a hip hop department and an R&B department, and they didn't delineate the different styles of urban music. It was just like, oh, that's urban, that's on that floor.
All did this.
Right. It's all on that floor, but everything else was like rock had a floor, pop had a floor, and this had a floor, and that had a floor. And so, because the labels treated urban music, which was the most popular music for a long time, as sort of like a bastard stepchild, it never got to grow the way that black music got to grow during the Motown era, where you had sort of its own sort of factory of creating hits for that were based on not only great songs and performers that were popular, but a great song with a popular performer, even if they did the same song 10 times, to get it out there with different artists. And we've kind of lost. It's also because the game is so much bigger, I think, because it can make so much more money. And I attribute it to the Backstreet Boys, Alanis Morissette time. Because if you were a major label, you could sign, 30 acts that you would write off 29 of them. Right. As long as you got an Alanis Morissette once, you were set for years and years and years and years. Yeah. Because that one artist basically would fill your coffers with tons of money to speculate.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, and actually a good example of that in jazz was Norah Jones, because Blue Note Records was on the verge of going into like non-existence, and then Norah Jones comes along and sells about 20 million records, and I know multiple friends of mine stayed signed to Blue Note for an extra 5 years because of Norah Jones.
Yeah.
And you touch on a really good point, which is the nature of the record business has always been, and it's funny when I explain how a contract for an artist works, it always cracks me up because it's all speculation. And it's all your advance that you pay back. I love when I explain this to people not in the record business. Your advance is effectively a credit card bill that you pay off at 81% interest or 85% interest rate.
Right.
So, and I know you and I both experienced this. I had a label deal with a label called Palm. It was a venture started by Chris Blackwell, and they had nothing but money. But what they didn't have was, and I liked my A&R guy, so this is rude to say, but they didn't have the actual label infrastructure of talent to break artists. They just had a lot of money. So they just wasted a lot. But one of the artists they didn't waste any money on was myself. I would turn in my little record, and then unbeknownst to them, it would do like 25 or 30 licenses, and they would have spent nothing on the record. So I was just like, within 2 quarters, I was like, hey, fellas, where's that beer commercial money? You know what I mean? I was
right.
And the thing is, you know, when you start learning that, like, well, they gave you 20 grand to make a record, and you did a $200,000 license, but guess what? On the master side of that license, you still owe them. You know, that 20 grand is actually, you need to earn $500,000 in there. You know, it's so tricky. So I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of digressing just because I love the thought of an 85% interest rate. It's criminal. And actually, you know, as a result, it's funny because of current events and because of protesting and, you know, a lot of things with the Black Lives Matter movement, labels are now being forced after 100 years to go and readjust accounting practices, because it's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, you know, you can't treat you can't treat black artists like this and be like, yeah, here's a Cadillac, Chuck Berry. Those are your royalties, you know? And it's like, that shit doesn't work anymore. So that's kind of a cool thing. But I think that the contraction of all of these styles of music, like for me, labels just became like, because you were talking about like an urban division, and that urban division could have Luther Vandross,
right,
and Pharoah Monch. It's like they have nothing to do with each other, but somewhere there's an A&R guy going, hey, can you two guys, I got a spam phone call.
Okay.
Can you guys work together? We'll make more money. And it's like, no, you won't. You'll ruin both artists. That's what you'll do. Thank you.
I know.
There's it's funny. I know I'm an old balding Jew, and I'm like, these labels, the pop music is terrible. But I just don't look to it. Are you still doing remix and doing stuff? Are you still in that? Like,
well, once in a while, yeah. I mean, I'm not. Again, like I said, I got so tired of the hipster young A&R guy who got thrown the remixing gig to go out. You do a remix, and then they'd be like, "Hey, can you send me that? I'm going to throw it in Ableton, and I'm going to do some stuff to it." And I'd be like, "Homeboy, A, no.
Yeah.
B, who are you? Who are you? I don't even know who you are. We've never even met in person." It would be different if it was like, "Hey, Adam, who I know is the A&R guy at Epic, and you come to me and say, 'Hey, Holmes, I need you to do this remix. I'm looking for something specific. Can you take a shot at it?' And then I send it to you, and you're like, 'Listen, you're 90% there. Do you mind if I just do a little like secret sauce and we could do it together?' And then I'd be like, 'Yeah, because I know you.' Yeah, that sounds good, Adam. Can you finish it for me? Perfect. Great.
I think the other thing is there's respect there, and there's a track record, and there's a knowledge of your knowledge to do stuff. Where I think that the equation is very messed up, and thankfully I've actually never had this experience, because I think I got out of that game early enough that Ableton didn't. By the time Ableton existed, I was already like, you know, an old man, and I was doing other things. but that would annoy the shit out of me because I had a manager where one of the interns at the management company got into advertising. And I'm talking like, this is someone that was an intern for 3 months and then got a job somewhere in advertising and then was like, hey, would you work on this? I hate working on TV commercials. Like, it's like my least favorite thing.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Oh, and it's like, can you work on this? And then a kid that was an intern that I told, like, you might want to buy, if you want to do production, like, maybe check out this program. Like, this is how early in his education it was that he got this gig. And within 4 months, he's like, I want to hire you for something. And then for the next 3 weeks, I'm going to give you notes every day on why you're not doing it correctly. And it's like, I'm just like, dude, here are the splits. And that's my other thing. I have this huge thing. When anybody says, just send me the stems, I'm like,
yeah.
I'll send you 3 stereo groupings of stems. You won't have access to anything. At least learn the terms. I'll send you the splits, you fucking idiot. And then you'll have the individual track. Anyway, but I love that. I'm sorry, man, that like you do a remix and some dude wants to like mess with it.
Dude, it's even worse. It's like you're doing a production, and you're in there producing the thing.
Yeah.
But look, full on major label budget production, and they're like, it's same thing. Send me the stems, like, and I'll be like, listen, you have to understand something about me. When the stems leave my DAW, I'm out.
I'm done.
I'm out. That's it. I'm not taking your stuff back. I'm done. Like, I know exactly where everything is. I know where we are in the mix. I know where everything is going on. If you can't communicate what you need from me, or come to my studio and just sit there and I'll do what you're telling me to do so we can try it. I'm not going to take time to export.
No.
You know what I mean? But whatever.
You reminded me of something. You reminded me of something though, because I did a thing for Clive Davis, and I dealt back and forth with Clive, and then I dealt with the A&R dude that was the remix dude for Clive. And working for someone like that, I was sort of like, all right, it's Clive Davis. I'm just going to take the notes, and they're going to be insane, but it's fucking Clive Davis, and he's 11 years into this. I just have to listen. And then it turned, then the Clive Davis notes turned into his remix guy's notes, and it got to a point, it was an Elvis Presley thing, and it was so surreal. The guy kept saying, I need you to put more compression on a certain track. So I'm like, fine. I'm adding everything that you're asking for. This thing is so compressed at this point. It's like, it's so squashed. Like,
it's a square.
Yeah. It's just, there couldn't be, the answer is none more compression. It's physically impossible. And so he ends up coming to my studio, and we end up finding out, my buddy Marty and I, who was mixing with me, he meant reverb.
Well, it's the same thing.
Yeah. So those kinds of things really crack me up, because I'm like, this guy has a job at a label for a couple $100,000 a year probably, and he does not like compression and reverb? Come on.
Well, that sometimes always makes me question my career choices. Sometimes when I'm like, here, I've been a full-time record producer for 25 years. I'm doing fine. I have 2 kids. Like, I'm doing well. Yeah. But these schmohas have like 6-figure jobs. Schmohas with like, they're making like $300,000 a year. They barely can. They don't even know what they're looking for. And you're like, maybe that would have been a better route, because you don't need to know anything. Maybe I know too much. Maybe that's the problem.
It's funny you say that. My father was a record producer for 45 years, and he really was a record producer, I think, in a great era where it was like you were constantly working, but it was groups and musicians and really great acts. And he worked with some amazing, Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway and Charles Mingus and Joe Zawinul, like just amazing jazz, amazing R&B, and he would always say to me, part of me wishes that I didn't care enough, because there's a way to fail to the top in the record. Yeah. I should have just taken like 3 and 4 year contracts where it doesn't matter, nothing mattered, but he cared so much about the music that he was incapable and he taught me that in a lot of ways, I've been lucky too and fortunate, but he taught me some other things where it's basically when I was 18, he was like, stay the fuck out of major labels. You will never be happy working on a major record. And it formed my entire career path. By the time I was 23 or 24, I had my fill of playing on those kinds of records and working with those kinds of artists. And I was just like, I'm done, man. Like, you think A&R guys or gals are a certain way now. The gatekeepers that existed in the 90s during, by the way, the Alanis Morissette and Hootie and the Blowfish, there was some great A&R people, but they were also so abso-fucking-lutely confounding. They were a different level of confounding. Not a hustle I wanted to be around. Not a hustle that I ever understood. I always had respect for someone like you who could do major label remixes and like run that gauntlet. Because to me, it was just like, I get one set of notes and I'm just like, do you ever hear the story about Aphex Twin getting called to do a Janet Jackson remix?
No, but I want to hear the story
Okay,
now.
no, it's real. I don't know him. I'm not even going to front and be like, oh, Aphex is my
whatever.
buddy.
Tell the story.
But some genius saw Aphex Twin somewhere in a write-up and said, we want him to do a Janet Jackson remix. So he proceeded, this was his remix. I think he got like 30 or 40 grand. He turned in a DAT with the remix, and it was like 8 or 9 minutes long and just found noise. It was like, so it was supposed to be. So I love the thought that Aphex Twin is like, oh, you want me to do a Janet Jackson remix? Well, this is what Aphex Twin does. And he proceeds to turn in, but that's the remix on a DAT. Here's your DAT. So someone probably had to buy a DAT machine at this point.
Listen to the whole fucking thing.
Yeah, listen to an 8-minute thing of like John Cage meets like actual digital distortion. And I just was, if I ever meet him, two things. I want to see his tank that he has on his property. He owns a tank. And I want to shake his hand and be like, I hope you did something really cool with that $40,000. It may have been 40,000 pounds, which is even more money.
That's the classic. Like, there's so many stories we can tell on that. I'll tell you one story about the commercial music world, which was like, it's the epitome of the stupidity of people who think they know something when they don't know anything. They're just following cool. Ming and FS got into doing commercial music because people realized, well, I had been doing scratching on a bunch of like commercials and stuff. And we sort of tripped our way into the commercial music world, and we're making good money, with licensing and all that.
You were the stars of a commercial.
Yeah, of the Nissan's Shift campaign, or
I
was
love that, man.
Those
are my boys. I would see you guys all over town. I'd be like, yo, you're in a fucking car commercial. You are the car commercial. That
shit paid for a tour. So people have to understand how important those things are. Like we were literally like, how are we going to pay for this tour? And then the Nissan Sounds or whatever it was called happened, and that was with Mophonics with Michael Frick, and then that paid for the tour. But so after we got into doing commercial music and blah 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 blah, one day I get a call, and it's an ad agency person, and they're like, we have a song that we want to do something similar to. Can you guys do sound-alikes? And I was like, of course. What is it? Just send it to me so that I can make sure it's a thing that we can do.
Sure.
So they send me the piece of music, and it's a Ming and FS tune.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, so I go, oh, okay. Do you not want to pay for the licensing? Is that what's up? Like, I was confused as to why they were sending me this piece of Ming and FS tune. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I have the session. I can just change some things, and we can maybe, you don't have to pay the master fee, and we could just get a publishing, whatever. Because I assumed that they knew that I was Ming from Ming and FS. They just didn't realize that, like, they knew me as Aaron. So after this weird, awkward, like 5-minute conversation where I'm having a nuts and bolts conversation about how I can make this thing happen for them.
Yeah.
They, I eventually am like, wait, do you know, I'm Ming of Ming and FS. You're sending me a Ming and FS track. I can make that music for you any way you want. You don't have to, you know what I mean? Like, you hire me to do that. This can happen. Right. And they were like, what? Once they realized that I was the person they were trying to knock off, guess who didn't get the job?
You.
Of course.
So check this out. You experienced literally, what is it called? It's a Coen Brothers movie. You were Barton Finked by the people that wrote Weekend at Bernie's. There was such a disconnect. It's unbelievable. So you had to tell them that you were the guy, and then they were like, "Bye, we don't want to work with you," because they probably got afraid that you would charge them too much because you were already the temp music.
It was so unreal to me because I was like, I'm letting you know I don't care. Like, I'm not offended that you want me to knock off the track. That's great. I get it. I understood the business of commercial music. I was like,
Sure.
if you need me to help you out, because, and the funny thing is I actually said to them, well, did you call Ohm Records and ask them to license the tune? Because I'm pretty sure it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg.
Yeah, they're open for business.
I was like, what did you? I was like, did you call Chris Smith? And he was like, I want $300,000. I was like, you know what I mean? And you know what kills me about that? It's like when you work for those commercial music people, they're always telling you, there's no budget, there's no budget, there's no budget, there's no budget. And then the next week they license Rolling Stone, Rolling Stone tune. And you're like, Rolling Stone tune is like $500,000.
Yeah. Actually, it's $1 million.
So there you go. But you're sitting here going, anyway. Well, so, all the music business is crazy. Yeah. We're crazy, so we're able to survive in it.
Yeah.
And,
I know one thing, like I got called from an ad agency to work on a Pepsi commercial. And I got called because they knew I was me. And in the spirit of Barton Fink, I was called to not copy one of my Mocean Worker tracks, but do something right like myself. So write a track to this specific animation, and I did it. And the thing is, I didn't mind working on commercials for a short period of time because it was really helping me learn how to write to picture and make it go in sync. And it was my goal always was to get into films and documentaries. And even at the birth of the Mocean Worker shit, I had already scored some films. I had already worked on docs. I really, really loved that world. And it's why I'm in it now. But I did a pass. And I sent them a thing, and I'm like, this sounds just like my latest record. It's just I twisted it a little. And I was told that I didn't know how to write like myself. and it was like, and that happened 2 or 3 more times where I just got fired for not sounding enough like Mocean Worker. And I was like, happy Hanukkah, I'm out. And the thing was, I started realizing with ad agencies, when they wanted you to sound like you, the kill fee needs to be pretty good. So that when I chase my tail and I'm told that I'm not as good as me, at least I get a little bit of bread and I'm out of there in 2 weeks. But it is nuts. And I know you want to talk about other shit other than
no. I mean,
adventures in tap dancing for ad agencies. It's unbelievable. I always liked the dudes at Ohm Records, by the way. I always got along with the guys that ran the label. They did some compilations and license stuff for me. Were they cool with you guys?
I mean, one of my closest friends, I don't speak to as much as I would like to. John Cornette was one of the 3 partners. There was Curious Shaw, Chris Smith, and John Cornette. At the time that I was signed to the label, it was a beautiful place to be. Everybody really cared about the music.
Yeah.
It was San Francisco in a great time to be part of that. Everybody really, really worked hard. The first album was like a dream come true. John Cornette became like one of my best friends. We spent a lot of time together. I would stay at his place when I'd go to San Francisco. I mean, it was very family. And my memories about it are great. What ended up happening, though, is the typical record label stuff, which is we were successful. Another person at the label, I'm not going to call out names, but somebody had a dream that another group that they had signed would do really well. They took the earnings from our project. They put it into that project. That project didn't perform. 9/11 happened, which killed our second record. So there wasn't. They didn't have money to restart that. So it kind of became a downward spiral with them because, there was different people were vying for control over what was happening with the catalog of music there. And, labels go through growth, but there was really cool people there. And that's one thing that they did have was they did have departments. They had a sales department. They had a marketing department. They had an A&R department. It was actually, I don't know how It's because they were able to get money from the tech world. They started out as a tech company doing CD extra stuff, and they went from being a CD extra, CD-ROM company into being a music label, a dance label, and that's how they were able to really be funded. They were sort of like San Francisco sweethearts. So like you were at a good place because they had a lot of money. If you didn't have staff, I was at a good place that had a lot of heart. There was enough money to make things happen, and then we just hustled really hard. I mean,
Well, but to speak to that time for anyone that like didn't live through it or anyone that's like interested, it's like there were labels in the States that were indies that like I thought it was really great. They were about the music, and even though every label had its own built-in horseshit and egos and bullshit that any other label would have. It was a great time and it was a great feeling when, you know, I was always very reluctantly a touring artist. I know I opened for you guys in Seattle once, and it was like Napoleon. We shared an MC.
Napoleon Solo. I love that dude.
Napoleon Maddox is a sweetheart. And I did so many different types of gigs with him. The only things I really enjoyed about touring was that for me, I never really fit into any one sort of category. And that wasn't because I was trying to be cool. I just never knew how to develop a show.
I remember giving you a hard time about that at some big rave we played or something. It might have been the One Fest E1 or something. I don't remember what it was.
Maybe. I don't know.
We had played a show and then you were playing and you were up there like live triggering you were way ahead of the time, like just doing all this stuff. And I was like, Adam, you're working way too hard, dude. No one even knows what you're doing. Just press play and like play an instrument and go.
That's the thing. So let me give you some context for that. I was coming from, my whole thing was like not a chip on my shoulder. I really play instruments and I'm really a musician. And I always felt like if you're on stage, you got to fucking earn it. You have to play. You got to make it tough. You know,
right.
My mentors were like, you know, my dad produced an artist that played 3 saxophones at once. Rassan Roland, I'm not going on stage and hitting a button. Now,
I get it.
Every kid in the world goes on stage and hits a button and makes 80, 90 grand a night, you know. Not every kid, but I'm just saying, I didn't think that way. So, of course, I was making it hard on myself. But I did love that in making it hard on myself, I ended up being like, I toured and opened up for so many different types of artists that I loved being exposed to different audiences. I wasn't stuck or not stuck. I wasn't just like, I just do like I'm a house DJ and that's it. And this is where I am and I play to these people. It never worked that way. But then for a brief period, I had a live band, an 8-piece live band where it was like hitting a button because it was a machine, man. It was so much fun. Everybody could play. I always just want to be a musician. You know what I mean? Like that's my thing.
I mean, you know, my heart is where you're at. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody who's, you know, a lot of musicians that I talked to today, they started in the electronic world and that's all they really have. I'm a guitar player. That's always been my, you know, like that's my bag. It's like I'm a guitar player. Yeah. I've played in a million bands, the camaraderie of playing in bands, being in a good band, having a good night, all of that stuff has always meant much more to me. The hard part for me is that in today's economy and just as an adult and all that other stuff, it was very hard to take that and make that work in the music world. So the electronic thing as that was happening really worked out well because I could control the productions and do all the stuff in the studio and then not have this unbelievably complicated foray into the live music scene. Yeah. And Fred and I used to play guitar and bass live, you know, with the turntables and all that stuff too. We did all that, but you know, that was very controlled. And when we would open for the jam bands, I would kind of like sometimes really want to just sit in as a guitar player, you know.
And I used to always let a motherfucker know if I toured with one band where they got a little like condescending, and I was like, any one of you, let me play the bass, man. Let me just let me fucking play the bass because you're about to get a lesson. And I'm very competitive. I'm like Michael Jordan in a pickup game. I do not like when jam band dudes get condescending. That didn't work for me.
Especially because a lot of those guys can barely play. More power to the guys who really have the soul. There's some guys out there that really, you know, take it to another level, and I'm down with that. But a lot of those bands just, from brute force touring and being in a college town and building a mass and following, and then getting on the jam band scene, and they were really not excellent musicians. They were just part of a really, that scene. And I get that. And I hated, it's funny though, the guys that always really could play were never condescending. Like the horn players that could really play, and the guys that we did jam crews. And I remember, I forget who I was talking to. It might have been Carl Denson. And he and his wife, and I was hanging out with him, and I was always just like saying,
Carl's great though.
I know, but I'm saying, like, we got down, and I was like, I don't always get that the people they like that band, but that band's crap, and you're not crap, but they don't like you as much, and all that. And he was like, man, it's about intelligence. You can't expect everybody to understand what you're doing. And that's the thing about being a musician. You have to understand what your audience is. So,
yeah, but the thing that's interesting about that concept is I found if I came to like a jam band scenario as Mocean Worker, and these guys don't know anything about me, the musicians that were the coolest did tend to be the best musicians, and they were curious about what the hell are you doing? And the other thing is the guys that could really play, they would listen to my gig and they would be like, they would know these musicians I was sampling and like triggering. So like a Carl Denson would be like, that's Russ on Roland Kirk. That's Les McCann. That's Fathead. That's a Miles Davis sample. Like, who are you? And it would just be great. Like I would always get along especially at festivals.
Festivals, right.
Festivals were the best scenario because you were just exposed to like 8 bands in one day and you're all just hanging out and it's just fun.
But I had an experience like that. We opened for Sting for a Microsoft like computer launch thing in Bryant Park. It was like one of those big random gigs that you get like in the middle of your career. And, we did it was a very weird set that we had to do. They wanted us to use the Microsoft equipment, which of course we didn't use, but you know the deal.
Yeah.
Past all that, when we were playing, I noticed that Sting's musicians were watching us play. Yeah. And afterwards, and they were all, it's Marcus Miller and who's Abe something. What's the drummer? Abe.
Wait, who's Sting's musician?
Sting.
It was Daryl Jones. It wouldn't be Marcus Miller. Marcus Miller never played with Sting, man.
The guitar player.
The Dominic Miller.
Sorry. Correct. Yeah. Right. I'm thinking Marcus Miller because of you.
Oh, he would love that.
I know, but when I think of Marcus Miller, I always think of you and vice versa. And I'm always like, but anyway, so Dominic Miller.
Yeah, Dominic, yeah.
Yeah, but and then I forget Abe's last name. I don't know. But Sting's musicians. They're the cream of the crop. And like, just to be around them, you're better. Right? Just to be in the room listening to them play.
Probably Vinny Colaiuta on
It wasn't Vinny. It was another guy's. It's Abe something. I could look it up. It's
maybe Abe Laboriel Jr.
That's who it is. Black guy, big.
It's usually Vinny, but like Abe would sub for him. But now he plays with Paul McCartney. That's how fucking good Abe Laboriel Jr. is. Right. But yeah.
So we're playing, and they're watching us play. And so afterwards, I'm like, I say to Abe, I'm a little embarrassed. I'm like, you guys why were you watching us? And he was like, because you guys are doing the new shit. Mm-hmm. He's like, this all playing drums, all that stuff. We hear that all the time. Like he's like, we want to see what's going on with the new stuff. And they were like, and they did the same thing. They understood what we were doing. Oh, that was dope how you double timed that record and then you went into that transition and you did that and blah, 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 blah. And it opened my eyes to being like, oh, they're not talking down to us because they're learning something that they can incorporate now into the way that they play, into the way that they think about music. And then funny thing to end that story though, afterwards, so we were kind of cheesing and Sting comes out and we're kind of cheesing around Sting, just kind of like, damn, it's Sting, right? Yeah. And then, they play and he's amazing, whatever. And then after they play, Bill Gates comes out to like introduce the new product and Sting is kind of cheesing around Bill Gates. Like he's kind of like shy around Bill. And I'm like, that's where I came up with the idea for Hood Famous Music, which is one of our labels. I was like, you're only famous in your own hood. Like, you know what I mean? No matter how big you are, it's still a hood. It's still a little microcosm.
I call it, that's shtetl. That's
shtetl.
Yeah. No, but that's the same thing as when Chris Rock said, don't forget there's somebody writing a check for Shaq and saying, here you go, Shaq, here's your check. Go buy a bouncy car. There's always someone that has like more juice, more money. Someone's going to be like, more powerful than whoever you think is like the all. Yeah.
By the way, I love that Mario's chanting in. Mario McNulty, amazing engineer. Abe was always on that gig, you cunts. It's true, though.
Very nice. Very classy. Classy, man.
I think that the word should be used more in American culture. I like it when I'm in England or I'm in Australia, and you can just use it like it's tea, like you fucking cunt. Like, oh, that rich cunt.
How you doing, love? Yeah. But yeah, no. But the interesting thing, like, to just sort of like, connect what we're talking about. It's like this, the label thing and the touring thing and the U.S. experience of electronic music coming to the States and being part of like kind of the birth of that, because I know that I started messing around with this stuff in the mid-late 90s, and like in New York, you had house music and that was it. Like drum and bass came over. I had been living in Europe for like 4 years. So by the time I came home from France, I lived in France, between 94 and 97, late 93 and 97. I just remember all of a sudden, within a couple years period, like there were all these indie labels. There was all this emphasis on like DJ culture and vinyl and DJing and American producers. And like, it just exploded. And there were some great labels, and there was a nice little period. I feel like the period we had in New York between like 98 and 2005, 2006, that was fun, man. Like,
it was real fun.
Yeah, and it was fun for me, like having a label deal. I owned a label, so by the time I signed a label deal, I was like, oh, let's see this voodoo economics. I know all this bullshit. So I saw how that ran, and like I knew Blackwell's label was just a front. Like it was just bullshit. Like, he was trying to get back in the game, but he really was not doing it the right way. And I knew that Palm was going to be over in like 2 years.
Yeah.
But it was fun to. Did you guys self-release at a certain point?
What we did is we learned that it's funny because it informed the way that I understand the music business today, is that, when we were making albums still. Albums were still valuable and viable, and making it, you could make money selling albums because they were sold for $50.99 or whatever. But the time in between, in our world, the dance world was accelerated. So people, although it was good for press to do an album every a year and change, it wasn't really good for the dance music community because things were changing so quickly. So what we did with Manhattan Studios is we would put out records that we didn't think Ohm would do justice by, because it would be. Ohm was a house label at that point. Mark Farina was their premier artist, and we were sort of this weird. They were in the turntablist world because they were in San Francisco and they made Deep Concentration, but they weren't necessarily like ready to release drum and bass records. So we released experimental drum and bass records on our own label in between our releases, just to keep things moving. And then we also, like the economics of break records, we were making DJ battle records. We made records that DJ Craze won battles with, and everybody was using the bar mitzvah breaks. They were called the But the bar mitzvah breaks, there was a great, this is funny, the economics of vinyl. So when people talk about vinyl coming back, it makes me want to punch them so hard in the face. I just can't even, because the economics don't work out. So you can say whatever you want to say about vinyl coming back. There's no economic pyramid for that to work in today's culture. No one has turntables, so you can't. Anyway, what we learned was when you sell vinyl to a distributor, which most people don't know, is that you manufacture a piece of product. It costs you, let's say, $2.85 to manufacture a 12-inch.
Right.
If you make it a single, you put a song on one side and a song on the other. It makes it louder because the physical, the grooves have to be cut larger. So that's why 12-inch singles have 2 songs on them, sometimes 3. But you can only sell those for, I think it was $6.99.
Right.
If you sell an LP, you can sell an LP which has all 13 songs or whatever on it. It's much quieter. You can't really play it in a club.
No.
But you can sell it for $12.99 or $15.99 at the time. But battle records, DJ battle records, were considered LPs, even though you would put less music on there. Right. And people would buy 2 of them.
Right.
Left and right. So we stumbled into this battle record economy where we would make the bar mitzvah breaks became like a lucrative project, because you put out this record that normally you're barely making any money on. All of a sudden we're making $15.99 on 2 copies or whatever, $9.99, whatever it was. This was back in the day. So we quietly were like, oh, that's why Qbert and these guys are making these battle records, because they're just like, they're banking it.
Yeah.
It was like mixtape culture.
Yeah, totally. And the thing is, production was much easier, I think, then too, because it's funny now. If you want to print vinyl now, it seems like you have to wait, and there's like only a couple places that do it, and it seems like it's a nightmare.
I don't know. To me, printing vinyl is like saying, I'm going to get a car from the 1920s and take it on a road trip. It's like, yeah, you can do that, and that might be romantic for the first 10 miles, but I'd rather be in an Audi 2021 Audi Q7 to go on my road trip. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, what cracked me up is I knew that the vinyl thing in a way was kind of horseshit when I noticed that Urban Outfitters all of a sudden had a vinyl section, and I would see the jazz department, like they had a jazz section in the vinyl, or most stores, because my kid was like 12, 13, a couple, he's 19 now, but I would go through and I would look and I'd be like, this is furniture. Like
it's furniture. Yeah.
$95 for a Cannonball Adderley record, which, by the way, I'd be more than happy to pay that for anything with Cannonball Adderley on it. But it's a $33 piece of vinyl that costs them $2, and they're selling you an aesthetic. It has nothing to do with someone going in and going, holy shit, I need that Billy Eckstine record. They were selling covers in stores, So I love that I managed to sneak in Cannonball Adderley and Billy Eckstine into our conversation.
I like that you got Barton Fink into this thing, because
you got Barton Fink though. That's the thing. You actually got Barton Fink, man. You're not good. I know a better Ming than you. I know someone that does Ming better than you. That's Barton Fink.
I know, it's crazy. But I'm amazed that you got that in there. Let's just talk about really quick, because it's funny. This hour went by like butter. I mean, I'm not surprised. I feel like I know that you do this also with other people. It's like we could do this every day and just have never-ending content, because two crazy New York Jews.
My buddy Adrian just joined, man. What's up, Adrian? That's my man from Philly. I've known him since I was like 12.
Nice.
But yeah, what do you want to talk about?
What I want to ask you, so I too have the love of scoring to film, and I do that. It's not my main. I'm more of a full-time record producer. That's kind of like my gig, and then my artist stuff, the house music stuff I'm doing now. But
yeah,
how you moved to LA? You decided to piece out of New York. Was the LA move a conscious decision to be in the flow of the movie making business? Because it wasn't.
No, so actually everything about my move had to do with my father passing away.
Okay.
New York for me was just like, my family is gone, and I don't know about you, but I was already seeing friends move.
Yeah.
Anyone starting a family was, moving to Jersey or Connecticut or sometimes to Philly or whatever. And I just reached the point in my life. I was 37 when my old man passed away. I'm 49 now. So I was, and I was already working on documentaries. I love scoring documentary films. That's like really my passion. And I was doing it. I was doing a nice amount of work for HBO, like while I was doing my Mocean Worker stuff. And, I just figured out how to get into that game. And it honestly, it fit my lifestyle so much better. Like, I'm an extroverted human that loves to not be around people. So I stay in my studio. When I'm social, I love to be social, but I really love to just stay in the studio and write. So what really, the move to LA was really about family and moving to a place that I thought would just be a great lifestyle for my family. My son was going into his 6th grade year. Middle school was starting. And I actually, after my father passed, I moved to Philly briefly. And I lived in Philly in the suburbs. I do not recommend that to anyone on the fucking planet. And I thought, my son is my stepson, and he came into my life when he was 8 years old, and I was just like, I'm not making this kid move to New York. So long story short, we decided as a family, maybe there will be some career things for me in LA, but I was kind of fine wherever I was. I was doing film work, living in New York and in Philly. But I will say this, the amount of work goes up when you're, especially for TV work, when you're in LA. proximity to certain things that just don't exist in other places. So I've gotten opportunities for TV and certain film things, but my documentary thing was already like a thing. So I think I moved to LA because I just wanted to have some space and nicer weather. I'm so sick of winter, you know.
I mean, I feel you, dude. I feel you. You know,
Yeah.
I'm a lucky guy. We have a beach house out. I'm in Sag Harbor right now. We pieced out
nice.
a while ago. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
you know, live in Harlem and all that, but we're out here. I come out here during the summers and do all that kind of stuff. And I think if we didn't have this, we would have moved to Colorado or LA or something like that, just to, you know, just to have a different sort of lifestyle. But I'm a huge beach person, so I'm out here doing my beach thing and all that. But we need to, let me just, two things. So first thing, the reason why I started the re-up is because I've been having conversations with musicians I hadn't spoken to in years when this whole thing came down.
Yeah.
And I found myself on the phone with guys that I really liked for an hour at a time, 2 hours at a time. And I don't speak to anybody. Like, you know, not like that. I'm social like you're social. Like, I'm out there go-getter. But I'm usually very, like, succinct. I don't like small talk. And I'm, like, you know. But I realized one of the things that I missed a lot in being in bands is the camaraderie of, like, the experience you have as a musician. So it kind of made me start this re-up thing because I wanted to be able to have time to speak to people that I really like and also enjoy. I want to learn from their experiences. So after this call, we got to stay in touch more. We got to keep talking. Yeah. We got to do all that stuff because it's important. You know, as we get older, you do less and less of it, right? It's
no, for sure. Yeah.
But I do this thing at the end of every re-up. I ask you a bunch of dumb questions. So just don't think too hard.
I never do.
Faith or science?
Yeah. I'm sorry?
Faith or science?
Science.
Rave or festival?
Dude, neither.
Ocean, lake, or desert?
Ocean, lake, or desert? Desert.
Big room or small room?
Oh, man, don't bring me into this DJ horse shit.
No, man, like, you know, when you play in a band, it's the same thing. You play a big room, you play a small room. The air moves differently. How do you put...
I like big room for that, for music. Something about more people, more energy, more love.
No judgment. I personally like the energy of small room for connection, but I like the way air moves in a big room much better.
Big room, bigger check.
Acid or mushrooms?
Oh, man. It's funny. I saw you talking to Ray Roker and you asked this question and I was like, where's this coming from? Neither. I don't do drugs, man.
That's good. You know, I can tell you, super disappointed. That was one of my favorite things that I did with Ray, and Instagram took a shit at the end and I couldn't upload it. It literally got frozen and I was crushed. My whole weekend I was crushed. Because Raymond feels like a brother that I never had. Like, we have very, very similar upbringings in two different places. And, you know, like, again, I got to learn more about him during that thing. And I was like, oh, my God, I just found a new brother and I lost this episode. So, man. Anyway, what's your superpower?
Funkiest Jew on the planet. Whether or not you agree with that, I don't give a shit.
How would you incorrectly describe your job?
Incorrectly? Oh my God. I write music for people that I have an enormous amount of respect for, and their input is greatly appreciated at all times, especially when they're producers.
What animal should survive if only one can survive?
Dogs.
So I was going to ask you cat or dog, so no need there. If not music, then what?
Philosophy.
Favorite meal?
Faux rigatoni bolognese. My wife kills it with the fake meat.
Hunter or gatherer?
Gatherer.
What's the last gift you gave someone?
I rescued a dog in my wife's name with a animal rescue, a LaBelle rescue in LA.
Being an ex-New Yorker, we only have 45 seconds left, but do you have a favorite deli?
Oh, I do. And it's Langer's Delicatessen in LA, believe it or not.
That's awesome.
It's the best fucking corned beef sandwich on the planet. I was stunned.
Favorite metal band?
Oh, shit. Is Van Halen a metal band for the
I'll give it metal.
First four records.
All right. Last question. What genre are the Talking Heads?
That's amazing. I love that. Their genre is music. They make music.
Adam, I love you. We're going to get kicked off in 3 seconds. I'll let you know when we post this up. Thanks so much for doing this. I'll speak to you soon.